For far too long, Americans have been forced to put up with Democrat-run cities that set loose savage, bloodthirsty criminals to prey on innocent people, really very, very innocent people. In every place, they control radical left judges, politicians, and activists, and they've adopted a policy of catch and release for thugs and killers. In Charlotte, North Carolina, we saw the results of these policies when a 23-year-old woman who came here from Ukraine met her bloody end on a public train. And here's a picture of it. This is the picture of it. And this is a picture of the woman, a beautiful young girl that never had problems in life, with a magnificent future in this country. And now she's dead.
On August 22nd, Zarutska's life was taken, and it was done in the most graphic on-video fashion you could possibly imagine. I'm not going to show you the video. You can find it on X if you're interested in seeing the full thing. First off, I don't think I could show it to you. I think this video would be taken down. And secondarily, I'm going to describe it in a way that hopefully you don't have to watch it, because I think it's important that you understand what happened. You can take my word for it, or you can watch it for yourself if you have a steel will and iron stomach and are emotionally sound that you can handle watching something like that. I wish that I hadn't, but in order to speak about it intelligently, I felt like it was necessary, so I did. Anyways, Iryna Zarutska was a 23-year-old Ukrainian refugee. She had arrived in 2022, right at the outset of the war, I believe. She truly fled Ukraine as a consequence of the war between Russia and Ukraine. And she arrived here, and she lived in North Carolina, and she worked at a pizza parlor, and she got off her shift, and she got on a train to, I assume, head home. And unfortunately, she never made it. So what transpires is, so that you don't have to watch it, I'm going to describe it as best I can. She sits down on the train. She's still wearing her pizza parlor attire. She's got the branding pizza parlor hat and shirt. And she just gets on the train, sits down, and she's there for a few minutes. Her assailant, a black monster, is sitting right behind her. He doesn't talk to her. She doesn't talk to him. There's no eye contact. There's no escalation. There's no fight. There's no conversation. There's no warning. There's no nothing. She is just sitting there on her phone. Couldn't weigh more than 100 pounds, little tiny thing, and harmless, utterly harmless. Out of the blue, this guy takes out from his pocket, he's got this red hoodie on, I don't know if it was in the hoodie or in his pants, but takes out what looks like a fold-out knife, and within less than 2 seconds, I mean, literally like blink of the eye type of attack. There's 3 motions. It looks as if, honestly, it looks more like slashing than stabbing. If you've seen the photo and not the video, and I encourage you to just see the photo and not the video, there's this freeze frame photo that's gone very viral where she's looking up at him and she's like that. What you realize if you watch the entire video, that is after the attack. She has already been mortally wounded, at least once, if not all 3 of the stabs. I don't know how bad all of them were, but she is panicked. She's horrified. She is looking around to see what happened, because obviously she was totally caught off guard, and she sees her attacker, and that's the last face she will ever see. This monstrosity that attacked her for abso-fucking-lutely no reason whatsoever. It's horrific. So what happens, she grabs her neck, and honestly, if you just see the 5 to 10 second video, it looks as if, you know, maybe it's not so bad. Within about 20 seconds, though, she has already collapsed to the ground. Within about 30 to 45 seconds, you can already see the blood pool that is starting to spread. And it is a fatal wound. And I will say, well, I don't think that even if you had a world-class surgeon on hand or an EMT or a paramedic right there at the very first attack, I don't think that her life could have been saved. I mean, I could be wrong. That's not my forte or my expertise by any stretch of the imagination. But the amount of blood that pours out within the first 90 seconds, it does not look as if it was survivable. It looks as if he got the carotid artery, to me, as a layman. And it's just unbelievable. I mean, unbelievably tragic. I'll get into more of the, you know, callous political analysis in a second. But I just want to say, you know, my heart goes out to her family. In Ukraine, I assume most of them still live there. I don't know for sure. Maybe they moved out here with her. Regardless, unbelievable tragedy. And while President Trump said that, you know, she had never had anything wrong in life, you know, a war refugee that gets to America and then has this happen. It's tragic beyond words, especially such a young person. I really don't have words for it. It's just the loss is absolutely brutal. But I do have words for these people. I have words for the people on the train itself. So because it's a 20-minute video, you get to see the full aftermath. And what you realize is that as there's probably 8 people in this train car, it's hard to say because it's facing from the front towards the back or like kind of angled a little bit. And you can't really tell how many people are sitting up in the front of the train, but I think I identified approximately 8 different people aside from Iryna in the footage. So first off, what you recognize is that no one does anything for her. I mean, literally for the first 90 seconds, even though she is on the floor and in dire condition, in need of immediate assistance, 30 seconds in, everybody has to be aware of that. She's collapsed. So at minimum, by 45 seconds, you have to see all of the blood everywhere. So you know she needs immediate assistance. I don't see anybody on their phone. I don't see anybody calling 911. I don't see anyone providing aid. I don't see anyone reaching out to her, trying to see if she needs aid, asking her questions, nothing. Now, granted, she had just been attacked. This guy is obviously unhinged and very dangerous. So I'm not expecting within the first 45 seconds for people to know exactly what happened because it was very fast. And if you weren't actually watching it, you probably wouldn't have known what transpired. So I want to give some grace. However, after you see that there's a tremendous amount of blood, also the assailant has already walked away. He's already gone to the front of the car. I don't know if he exited because I only have the footage facing the rear of the car. I don't know if he actually exited or if he went to another train car further up front of the train. I'm not sure. Regardless, he's not there and they are not assisting her. By about 90 seconds, one man, God bless him, does approach her and starts to, identify the issue and starts to try and help her. So I want to be very clear. All of my anger is not directed at him. He did what he could. He actually takes off his shirt. He tries to stop the bleeding. He is a hero and he deserves whatever public applause you can give him, honestly. Everybody else, though, for the first 4 minutes does fuck all. They do nothing. Most of them pretend as if it's like nothing's even happened. It's truly jaw-dropping to witness. And there's actually one, this black dude, he looks like he's videoing it. And he's videoing as this other man is trying to save her life. And it looks as if he's videoing, I can't say definitively, but it looks as if he's videoing her as she dies. And then he steps over the guy who's helping her. He kind of I don't know if he leaps, but he walks over him and he leaves. And I can't put myself in that mentality. I don't know how you could be so callous. I don't know how you could have so little value for life. It's just unspeakably evil. I don't know how else to describe it. It's really mind-blowing that there's such little respect for life in that community, that you would have 7 other people, give or take, that don't give a fuck that this lady is dying. And they don't try and help her at all. And it doesn't even look like they're calling the cops. It's infuriating. There's something about the nature of big cities that really dehumanizes people. It makes them callous. It detaches them from their fellow man, which is ironic because you would think that if living in the country, you would not be around so many people and therefore you would be more detached from humanity. It's actually the inverse, where the less people you have around you, the more you care about those people. And the more people you have around you, the less you care about them. It's as if we have a threshold or a ceiling on how much empathy we're able to offer our fellow man. And if you have too many people around you, your ceiling is already met just in saying, thank you or opening a door for somebody, which probably in New York, that doesn't happen very often either, I would imagine. And I think this is where you get the entire stereotype of the rude New Yorker, is that just it's so competitive and people are so detached from one another that they end up being assholes. And I guess that's how you have to be to survive in the big city. At least that's the argument that they make to justify that behavior. Regardless, it's a problem. It's a real problem. Now, a lot of people are making this connection, and I think they're right to do so, to Daniel Penny, that Daniel Penny tried to restrain yet another black guy who was out of his mind and arguably very dangerous. It's hard to say for sure whether or not he would have done anything. No one will ever know. But he had attacked people in the past. He did have charges, so he had the capacity for sure. Anyways, Daniel Penny was arrested, and he was facing, the rest of his life in jail. So if you're a bystander on a train and you see a violent action or someone who looks to be violent, you're not going to intervene. So I can understand that rationale. I can understand if you see someone who's dangerous, who hasn't actually attacked anybody, not doing anything. What I can't understand is when the assailant is gone, that you still demonstrate zero concern for your fellow man. Like, what has happened to you? What has happened to your soul? What has happened to your humanity? That you could allow for this little, tiny, 23-year-old girl to expire in front of your eyes and you do nothing. I mean, as I said, I don't think that her life was salvageable, tragically. I don't think that you could have, had you given the best aid in the first 45 seconds, I don't think that you could have saved her. Regardless, just the humanity to try, or the humanity to comfort her, to be the last she saw aside from her murderer, to show kindness and love in those final moments. I just think that's the least that could have been asked of you. And especially given that the guy was gone at that point, even if she's already, fainted and she's unconscious, you could at least be there for her or try. And no one did, other than that one man. And it's just, oh, God. Now, this is a well-known phenomenon. It's called the bystander effect, or diffusion of responsibility. So this is a well-known thing that sociologists have studied, and this is what happens. There's always this assumption that someone else will do something. So if there's all these other people around, someone's going to assist her. So the fact that that one guy did 90 seconds after she's already on the ground, I guess I don't have to do anything. Well, that's kind of a scientific explanation for why people behave the way they do, but it's still not a moral justification. It's not a moral action to see your fellow man in need, in such grave need, and to do nothing, to step over the guy that's actually assisting her to go do whatever you're going to do next. And I think, on a macro level, what we're seeing is this is byproduct of a civilization that no longer cares for one another because we don't see ourselves as a people. We don't have the roots that bind us together in a way that makes us care for our fellow man. And it's not as if you can't care for all people regardless of some sort of national pride, but the way human beings function, broadly speaking, is that if there's too many people around, you just don't have, as I said earlier, there's kind of a ceiling on how much empathy you can have for people. So therefore, you become very callous. So what breaks through that callousness? Well, in my opinion, it's oftentimes seeing each other as kinfolk. That oftentimes comes along with national pride, regardless of skin color. That's what made America very unique, is that we could still see our fellow men in America as an American, regardless of skin or religion or any of that. As a consequence of the critical theory deluge over the past 2 decades that happened through academia and then trickled into the media space and then to Hollywood and basically became all-encompassing, what I think happened is that more and more we were divided on race, on skin color. And all of this was done under the pretext or the guise of trying to address racial injustice. But what they really did is they gave everyone racial consciousness again. Because only speaking for myself and most of the white people that I knew, racial consciousness had essentially been obliterated. There was no concern of what someone looked like. If you saw someone that was obviously mortally wounded, you would go to their aid. If you see a car crash, you would stop and try and help. Like, this is just naturally what you would do. I mean, not everybody, but a lot of people would, because you viewed them as your fellow countrymen, your fellow man. And that has been lost. And look, no one's going to want to make this point, but you have to make it. Almost everybody on that train, aside from her, was black. Almost everybody on that train had zero concern for her well-being whatsoever. Now, I am not going to cast aspersions against the entire black world. That's ridiculous. And obviously, actually, the man that assists her was, I don't know if he was Latino, Hispanic, or light-skinned black guy, but he tried to help her, and he was not white. So I am not making a blanket statement here. However, I will say the fact that there's 6 or 7 other black people on that car that didn't give a fuck about what just happened, I personally boil down to not so much necessarily diffusion of responsibility or the bystander effect, but rather complete lack of concern because she was white. Now, I've never been black. I've never lived the black experience, and I don't know what it's like. And I don't know if the same thing had happened and it was a tiny black girl who had been attacked, that they would have behaved any differently. Perhaps there's a level of violence in that community that just makes it so that these people did not react because they just see violence all the time, and therefore they didn't see, that's just what they would normally do. I find that hard to believe, though. I really do. I find it very hard to believe that they would have reacted the same way if it was viewed as someone that they considered their brother or sister. And unfortunately for Iryna, they didn't view her that way. They viewed her as the other. And now, as much shame and anger and guilt that I could apply to them, really what I want to kind of again extrapolate this out to a more macro analysis. I really want to apply the shame to the people that pushed this critical theory nonsense on us for the past 2 decades. It was longer than that, but it really took hold over the past 20 years. The media apparatchiks that did it, the college professors that did it in Ivy League all the way down, and ultimately the politicians that pushed it too, and then Hollywood that propagandized us with it. The ones that constantly harped on the BLM movement and all this, that the white people were the oppressor, and therefore they could never be a victim. And regardless of whether or not that this applies to every single person on that train car, I have no doubt that it had an impact to perceive white people broadly as your oppressor and you as a victim of their oppression. Well, when you see one of them victimized, what is your natural response going to be? Well, it's going to be what you just saw, which is nothing. You're not going to lift a finger to help. And that's what happened. Now, there's going to be a lot of political commentators that try and turn this into fodder for white nationalism. I am not one of those people, despite my shaved head and the fact that I look like Edward Norton. That is not the direction that I'm trying to take this country in or trying to take the show in. I still think that that's a dead end and ultimately counterproductive to peace and prosperity and human liberty. So that is not where I'm headed with this. But you have to be honest also about the reason people behave the way they do today. And I think that it is very hard to argue that what I'm saying isn't true. That the indoctrination, the woke mindset, the critical theory, if you want to be more studious about the analysis, broke people's brains. It made it so that they dehumanized white people, and therefore they became unhuman. They became callous. They became disinterested in being a loving, kind, normal person to your fellow man. Some of this can just be boiled down to cowardice, obviously. You're always going to have people that see someone who's been mortally wounded and they're just going to run because they don't want to be next. I get that. I don't respect it, but I understand it, and that's understandable. However, some of these people were not running for their lives. They were just sitting there casual as can be, as if nothing had happened. And those are the people that I really think demonstrate a real just loss of humanity, that they do not care about their fellow man any longer. And perhaps I'm being over analytical. Perhaps it's, they didn't understand what had happened, but I'm just telling you, based off of the footage I saw, there's no way you didn't know what happened. It is evident, to put it mildly. You don't even have to really be looking to know that there is someone on the floor and there is a pool that lets you know exactly how serious the situation is. And if you're not doing everything in your power as a bystander, regardless of how many people that are there, how many people you think are going to help, the fact that you're not at least on your phone, even if you have no capacity to assist, you have no first aid knowledge, nothing. The fact that you're not on your phone or getting off the train immediately to go grab a cop, something. Go grab a paramedic, something. Nothing. The vast majority did nothing. All right, I've been very critical of the media, academia, everything else. Not done yet, though. We have to talk about the judges and the politicians that got us here. Now, they are kind of downstream of this sick critical theory ideology. So again, that's like, whenever anything's downstream, I put the majority, if not, the totality of the blame up top, and then the blame trickles down along with the stream, right? Still, the judges that went along with this woke worldview, that essentially they became convinced that if you were a criminal, it's because you were a victim. Every single criminal, they had a backstory, and we needed to have restorative justice and yada, 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 yada. No one could ever just be bad. No one could ever just commit evil. Now, I think there's fair arguments to be had that, yes, hurt people. That if you had a terrible childhood and you were surrounded by crime and you were a victim of crime and you had been assaulted or molested or whatever, that, yes, you're probably going to be a really fucked up adult. You're going to do really fucked up things too. But guess what? It doesn't remove culpability. It's still your responsibility. All of us have had something traumatic happen to us in our lives. And if you haven't, God bless. I don't know anybody that hasn't. It doesn't give you carte blanche. It doesn't enable you to do whatever you want and victimize your fellow man because, oh, woe is me. When I was 7, my dad slapped me or whatever. It's fucking ridiculous. Oh, my dad was in prison because of the war on drugs. And look, yeah, you have my sympathies. My sympathy for you ends the minute you assault somebody. The minute you actually take a life, zero empathy. I don't give a fuck what happened to you as a kid. And I don't give a fuck about your mental health either. And there's this tendency to try and write off or justify the behavior of people as if, sometimes people don't just do evil shit. Well, he did evil, real evil. And he had been arrested over a dozen times. And he was on the streets. He had been arrested just earlier this year. And he was released. And had he not been, she would still be alive. That's a fact. Now, Trump and company are going to immediately use this as fodder to try and justify their utilization of the National Guard to move into these cities that have become lawless hellholes. I can't blame them. I would do the same thing if I was a politician. This is red meat for exactly what he wants to do. Now, I am very concerned about using federal national police essentially to move into local jurisdictions. I think it's a violation of the 10th Amendment. I think it's very dangerous. However, it's happening now. Especially after this story. I just don't see how you stop it. I think that they're going to proceed with it, and God help us if they have bad intentions, because...
Today, I would like to address the tragedy that has not received nearly enough media attention, the brutal murder of Iryna Zarutska. Here are the facts that many outlets have shamefully and intentionally failed to report until President Trump drew attention to it. On August 22nd, Iryna Zarutska was stabbed to death on the rail system in Charlotte, North Carolina by a savage career criminal. This is a public transportation system that many in the area use every single day to go to school and work. Iryna was on the train that night traveling home from her job at a pizzeria, still in uniform from her shift. This beautiful, innocent 23-year-old young woman was a Ukrainian refugee who had recently fled her country for a chance at a safer life and a promising new beginning here in the United States of America. But tragically, a public transportation system in a major American city was more dangerous than the active war zone that she left. DeCarlos Brown has been charged with crimes no fewer than 14 times, dating back to 2011, including for armed robbery, felony larceny, breaking and entering, and shoplifting. Brown had previously served 5 years in prison for a robbery with a deadly weapon charge, and he had also forfeited bonds 3 different times, twice in 2014 and once in 2023. Despite all of this past documented criminal history, when Brown was arrested yet again in January of this past year, a Democrat judge, I will add, was a strong supporter of former Vice President Kamala Harris, released this insane criminal once again without requiring him to pay any bail. He simply had to sign a written promise to return for his court hearing. Think about how crazy it is to ask a career criminal, someone who by definition repeatedly breaks the law, to just sign a written promise and come back again another day. This is madness. This monster should have been locked up, and Iryna should still be alive. But Democrat politicians, liberal judges, and weak prosecutors would rather virtue signal than lock up criminals and protect their communities.
I think that the public is going to accept it, if not love it. They're going to want it because these cities have become so dangerous that many people are just like, I don't care about principles. I don't care about the 10th Amendment. I don't care about any of that, Clint. I want to be able to walk down the street and not worry about some dude in a red hoodie coming up and taking my life. I get it. It's totally human nature. You want safety. I just want to remind you, if you want safety so bad that you're willing to give up all liberty, you will have neither. You will be endangered on both sides. So just remember that. It is true that these judges and these prosecutors absolutely created this crisis. And you have to add that most of these DAs that got in to push these extraordinarily, soft on crime, restorative justice, woke judicial processes were backed by Soros and company. That's the truth. And this is the inevitable conclusion of those policies, that if you don't honor property rights, if you don't lock up violent criminals, I want to be very, Charlie Kirk was saying, we don't have an over-incarceration problem. We have an under-incarceration problem. Ben Shapiro is saying the same thing. We need more people in prison. I just want to remind you guys, nearly 1% of adults in America, obviously it's higher for men because men are the, predominantly those that are in prison and also predominantly the ones that commit crimes and violent crimes. Nearly 1% of the adult population in America is in prison right now. That is, it's like 0.87 or something like that. Regardless, it's the highest in the Western world by a lot. It's 10x what like most of Europe is. So this argument that we need more people behind bars, I think is faulty, to put it mildly. And I think it's backed by the prison industrial complex. So I want to be very cautious about anybody getting on the bandwagon with that. However, it is obviously true that we need a lot more violent people in prison. And what I would like to see is a swap out. This is also an inevitable consequence of putting so many nonviolent people in prison. And also, many of the nonviolent people that got put in prison get radicalized and turned into violent criminals as a consequence of being in prison. If you go in there for, drug possession and then you come out 4 or 5 years later or 10 years later, depending on how severe the charges were, you could come out and be a hardened criminal. This is, you could talk to any cops about this. They all know it to be true. Again, that doesn't justify their behavior. It doesn't make, because they shouldn't have gone to prison because they were a nonviolent drug offender, that now they come out and they commit a violent act. That doesn't give, I don't have any sympathy for them. Fuck them. They should go to prison forever. But I'm just saying, if you want to stop this cycle, if you want to stop creating violent psychopaths, you might want to start there. So let's not encourage us to have, we already have the most people in prison of any country in the Western world by a lot. So when Charlie Kirk and Ben Shapiro start telling you, we need to have way more people in prison, think twice about it. Please. I implore you to think very deeply before you get on board with more people being put in prison. We need different people in prison. Let's be very clear. These DAs and these prosecutors, they stopped putting violent criminals and people who were committing property crimes in prison, or at least they gave them extraordinarily lenient sentences that allowed them to walk free way sooner than they ever should have. I am not that guy. There's some libertarians that are just very, very much opposed to the public prison system because it's publicly funded. And look, I get all the arguments. Regardless, you cannot have violent people walking around free. Okay? Especially if they're known to have been violent. I don't have any sympathy for that. You got to go away forever. Now, there's extraordinary circumstances, manslaughter, accidental killings. Sure, I understand that. If you take a life with malice, I just think you're too dangerous to be in civilization anymore. And you got to go away at least a couple decades. And if the judicial system was ran in a way that's actually productive, maybe there's a chance that you could actually reform these people and make it so that they are safe to come out and to live a normal life. And God bless those that are capable of it. But I think at some point, I'm just telling you how the public's going to react. The public is going to say, I don't care. I don't care that 8 out of 10 guys that get out of prison that committed a violent act will never commit another violent act, even though I think the recidivism rate is much higher than that. But it just hypothetically, 8 out of 10 would not. They're still going to say, don't care. All 10 of you got to stay in. I'm not risking it because of those 20% that are going to come out and take somebody's life. I can't blame them. And this is going to be the real movement coming up. I can tell it already. This is the whole tough on crime, 3 strikes and you're out mentality. I lived it. Most of you are probably too young to remember, but this happened big time in the late 80s and the 90s. I was a kid, but I still remember, vaguely what transpired. And what happened was they made it so that if you were a 3-time felon, you went away for life, 25 to life. And there was 3 strikes and you're out. That's what they called it. And I think that's coming back in a big way. The problem is it's not a reaction to what's actually happened. The 3 strikes and you're out program wouldn't have been such a bad idea if it was violent felons, but it wasn't. Oftentimes it was not violent felons, and it was not 3 violent felonies. It was just 3 felonies. The problem is that our felony laws are so broad that you could have someone who commits 3 felonies that is not violent. Now, a lot of them are, of course, most of them are, but I'm not interested in seeing non-violent people put in a cage for the rest of their life, but I am very much interested in someone who commits 3 violent assaults or murders going away forever. Yes, I am. So, can we find a reasonable common sense middle ground? that doesn't say we need to have 2 to 3% of the American population behind bars, that doesn't say we need to have drug users be in prison for 20 to 30 years. Can we find a middle ground that's reasonable ever? It feels like every time I talk about anything that it's like there's a real obvious reasonable middle ground here, and I feel like it's going to be laughed off. You're soft on crime. Other people, you're too hard on crime. This is just common sense. If you're a violent, dangerous person, you don't ever get to come out, and if you're not, you shouldn't be there in the first place. Hey, this is not obviously and like logically rational. I don't know. Let me know what you think down below. Leave a comment. Tell me if I'm crazy, but I think that's the obvious answer.
A white Ukrainian refugee was murdered just because she was white. Everybody knows that, obviously. If a random white person simply walked up to and stabbed a nice, law-abiding black person for no reason, it would be an apocalyptically huge national story used to impose national sweeping political changes on the whole country. Instead, Megan Basham, no one seems to care when a white woman gets stabbed to the death.
Wow. He said white a lot.
Well, we are talking about it here on ABC.
I got to pause it there because there's two really obvious points that need to be made. First off, he said white a lot. That's what the lady on the panel says about Charlie Kirk. Guess who also said white a lot? Her attacker. The guy who took her life said, got that white girl. Got that white girl. He said that twice. Now, you can argue he's a crazy person and he's a lunatic, whatever. Regardless, his motivation was evident. He said, got that white girl. A total stranger, someone he had never interacted with before. This was within 30 seconds of the attack. He says, got that white girl. Like he was proud. He was proud of what he had just done. And he knew that he had committed a heinous act that was likely to take her life because she had already collapsed to the ground. So, look, you want to put it on Charlie Kirk or any of the commentators that make this racial, but you should start there. You should start with the fact that the black dude who took the white girl's life said, got that white girl. That's what he said. Not me, not Charlie Kirk or Shapiro or anybody else. He did.
I guess
True.
I don't think that's fair. Look, being in the system, because I have represented people who are mentally ill, and here's the balance. The balance is taking away people's free versus evaluating their mental illness. And New York City, there are a lot of programs for people who are mentally ill, but they have to want to be there.
Yeah, and it's
about
difficult
forcing them to be there.
When you are mentally ill, you have a hard time knowing that you are mentally ill.
Secondarily, this talk about how there's lots of options for mental health, but you have to want to be there. This is what they're saying on CNN, right? This is the problem. If you are, and I say this as someone who's had mental health issues in his family, if you have someone who is really in need of hospitalization, that is super mentally ill and a danger to themselves or others, yes, it is very challenging to get them the help that they need. And most states, especially Democrat-ran states, you have no capacity to get them the help that they need. That doesn't change the fact that they need help. And this is the whole reason that there was insane asylums back, before Ronald Reagan. It's increasingly hard to argue that we don't need forced care for those that are severely mentally ill or severely drug addicted. There's a tremendous overlap in that Venn diagram where usually it's both. They're mentally ill and they're drug addicted because they're self-medicating because they don't know how to deal with their inner demons. Now, in most Democrat states, you can't do anything about that. And that's the reason that we have such an epidemic of homelessness and drug addiction. And that's also the reason that we have an epidemic of violent crime in these cities, is because you are letting unhinged, drug-addled people roam free. And many of these people have loved ones that care about them that have tried probably multiple times to get them the help that they need. But as you said, they have to go voluntarily. Well, if you're crazy enough, and even if you're not, if you're just stubborn enough, you're not going to accept that care. Are we going to continue to live in a civilization where we just let crazy people and drug-addled people roam the streets and commit violent acts and do nothing about it until they commit those violent acts? I guess so.
But also, people like Charlie Kirk, Van, they've been looking for opportunities to make this some sort of reciprocal George Floyd situation. And that's the part that I think he's almost giving away the game. And it's sad to see a lot of people going along with it.
What happened to that young woman was horrible. And it's everybody's nightmare. If you're in any public space, a subway, whatever, that something bad is going to happen to you or somebody you care about. So it does strike a chord. We don't know why that man did what he did. And for Charlie Kirk to say, we know he did it because she's white, when there's no evidence of that, it's just pure race mongering, hate mongering. It's wrong.
Pause it. Hey, Van Jones, if the perpetrator, if the assailant says, got that white girl, what do you think his motivation was? Did she make his pizza wrong? Did she deliver the pizza cold? I mean, what are we talking about? They had no interaction prior. There's video. Do your fucking job. If you're going to get on air and comment on this, as I did, I watched it. So how are you going to get on there and say, we don't know? So Charlie Kirk is just race baiting. He's just trying to, start a race war or some bullshit. No, this guy said that. So at least be honest about it. Good God.
Then he says that if something like that had happened the other way, there would be sweeping changes imposed on society. Where is the George Floyd Policing Act? It didn't pass. Even when you had a white police officer murder a black man on live television, the whole world saw, there were no sweeping changes. In fact, not one law was passed at the federal level. So I think that's an important thing to point out.
Pause it. We had congressional photo ops where they're like wearing shadikis and shit or whatever, how you pronounce it. I don't know how you pronounce it. Anyways, you get the point. African, like traditional African garb, and they're like taking a knee. You had cops all across the country taking the knee with Black Lives Matter protesters. You had white people that were like fucking kissing their boots and stuff. It's insane. So you think any of that's going to happen for Iryna? Any of it? The answer is no. None of it. Nothing's going to happen. In fact, I mean, sure, I think that the guy will be prosecuted, and God willing, he will be. But if you think that if there are any new sweeping laws, it's probably going to be under, hate crime pretext. And I don't want to go down this hate crime path anyways. This tit for tat escalation of, protected classes is not where we need to go. We need to be treated equally under the law. I don't know why this is such a profound or unusual statement to make. We don't need special laws. If you take a life, that's hateful. I don't need a hate crime law. You're still going to go away forever. Why do we even need to have that type of stuff? It's ridiculous. When did that happen? That was 2020, man. Who was the president? Joe Biden. What happened, bud? So for the record, I don't think that there should have been any federal laws that were passed as a consequence of George Floyd. I think he died of a fentanyl overdose. Now, you could argue whether or not the cops should have been on his neck for 8-9 minutes. I don't think they should have. However, if you actually watch the footage, this is a much more complicated and nuanced story than you've been told. And I'm sure most of you are already aware because you watch stuff like this. So you're undoubtedly aware of the footage that demonstrated that he was put in the back of the police car, that he asked to be taken out of the car, that he asked to lay on the ground. So yeah, he definitely did not cooperate with the police. That still doesn't mean, in my opinion, that they were justified in kneeling on his back the way they did, as long as they did. Now, did that contribute to his death? I'm not sure. Would he have died regardless? I think so, probably. But can I say definitively? No, I can't. But it doesn't change the fact that he did take a lethal amount of drugs and probably would have died regardless. Yeah, someone did mention race, and it wasn't Charlie Kirk. The first person to mention race was the murderer. So let's be very clear about that. This is not just some random white on black crime that people are assuming was race-based. His first sentence, his first 2 sentences after, was got that white girl. So it's a fair assumption to make that this was racially motivated, especially given that there was no impetus for this behavior whatsoever outside of his own words, which was that. So yeah, I think it's fair to assume that it was racially motivated. Now, does that mean that I want hate crime laws to try and get her justice? No, because there are laws on the books that can get her justice, which is him in prison forever. And if he's reincarnated, put him in prison again forever. Just monstrous behavior. So if you've hung on this long, we're going to get to the cancelable part of the show. These are the statistics that you're not supposed to discuss, and if you do discuss them, you're immediately accused of being racist and bigoted and blah, 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 but it doesn't matter because, as you know, I always just seek out the truth wherever it may lead and let the chips fall where they may. So here's some statistics that are extraordinarily disturbing, and it was hard for me to even believe, but they are true. First off, obviously the majority of murders are committed by men. Men are usually more violent than women on the whole. So that's not exactly surprising. What is surprising is that black men, who are approximately 6.5% of the population, are responsible for more than half of the murders in America. Now, you can argue there's disproportional prosecutions and blah, blah, blah. Regardless, that is a way disproportionate murder rate amongst black men. Now, let's be very clear. 90+%, probably 99% of black men in America are not violent. It's not what I'm trying to say. What I am saying is that most people are not violent, but the majority of murderers are black men, and they are only 6.5% of the population. That's a conversation that has to happen regardless of how it makes you feel or labels that get placed on you. And let me add, if you are concerned about black men's well-being, you ought to be concerned about these statistics too. You know why? Because 1 in 21 black men will be murdered. It's 4% or so of black men will be murdered in their lifetime. Who will they be murdered by? Not white men, not Asian men, black men. So before you hear these statistics and start flipping out and calling me racist, you might want to ask yourself, is it racist to deny these statistics given that the victims of these murders will also be black men? Food for thought. Additionally, and I couldn't even believe this, but it is essentially comparable, these numbers, because as I said earlier, men commit the majority of murders because we are more violent. Sorry. It's a testosterone or whatever the justification is for why we're more violent. It's just true. And historically, it's always been this way. Well, here's a statistic that's truly jaw-dropping. Black women have murder rates comparable to white men. So there is a disproportionate violence problem in the black community versus the overall population. That's just true. Again, not saying that all black people are a problem. I'm just saying we have to be honest about the fact that there is a serious problem. And there's a ton of black people that would like for us, all of us, to start telling the truth about it, because it is not helping their community to say, oh, there's no reason for any of this. There's no similarities between these cases that could actually explain why some of this is transpiring. Go to Chicago and talk to some of the aldermen there. If they won't tell you the truth, I'd be shocked. Well, the aldermen in Chicago are politicians, I think, so maybe they wouldn't be honest, but talk to a pastor. Maybe they'd be honest about it. It's a real fucking problem. And I think that it's time that people just tell the truth about it. It doesn't mean that you have to advocate for, Jim Crow and slavery and deportations or repatriation or whatever you want to call it. You don't have to advocate for any of that. You just have to be honest. You just have to tell the truth. And the truth is there's a real problem there. And if I was a black man in America, I'd want to fucking tell the truth about it. Because if I recognize that there was a 4+% chance that I would be murdered by someone who looks like me in my lifetime, that's a serious problem. I mean, think about how high that is. I still can't even believe it's true. 4 out of 100 black men will be killed by their fellow African American in their lifetimes. That's astonishing. Now, I'm sure it's localized and that it's much higher in like a place like Chicago. It's probably 15 to 20%. And if it's in rural places, it's probably back down to normal levels of 1% or less. But my God, 4+% of black men will be murdered in their lifetimes. When I read that, it was just so jaw-dropping, so profound, so shocking that I had to tell you guys about it, regardless of the fact that I'll be labeled and maybe even censored for saying it. But that's crazy. That's crazy high. And just to give you ironclad comparisons so that you understand how crazy high that is, the percentage for white men is 0.8%. Now that's too high. I'm shocked that it's almost 1% of white men will be murdered in their lifetimes. That's crazy high too. But it's still under 1% versus over 4%. I mean, what's that, 5, 6x? That's unbelievable. And we've been so browbeaten and so, aggressively labeled as racist for having these conversations that no one wants to talk about it. No one wants to just tell the truth. I mean, it's obviously a serious problem. And if you want to boil it all down to, poverty and racism and entrenched, whatever legacy of your parents got put away for the war on drugs. Look, okay, whatever. Whatever the backdrop is, whatever excuse or explanation you want to give it, it doesn't change the fact that once you take someone's life, there is no sympathy.
What we got to do, if we really want to see homicides go down, is keep bad guys with guns in jail. Because when they're in jail, they can't be in community shooting people. So when people talk about what we're going to do different or what we should do different, what we need to do different, that's the thing that we need to do different. We need to keep violent people in jail. Right now, the average homicide suspect has been arrested 11 times prior to them committing a homicide. That is a problem.
There is no backstory that I'm really interested in hearing. There's not. You are a violent, dangerous person, and you have to go away. And I don't give a fuck what you look like. I don't give a fuck what God you believe in. You take a life, you go away. Unless it's in self-defense, obviously. Enrollment is just around the corner, where health insurance companies hope you'll blindly sign up again for overpriced premiums and confusing fine print. Don't just take someone else's word. Trust yourself and take control of your future with Crowd Health, the healthcare alternative for people who make their own decisions. Stop playing the health insurance game. Join Crowd Health, a community of people funding each other's medical bills directly. No middlemen, no networks, no nonsense. Welcome to Crowd Health, the health insurance alternative. Healthcare for under $100. You get access to a team of health bill negotiators, low-cost prescriptions, and lab testing tools, as well as a database of low-cost, high-quality doctors vetted by Crowd Health. And what if something major happens? You pay the first $500, then Crowd Health steps in to help fund the rest. It feels like the options we used to have before Obamacare really broke the entire system, now didn't he? And of course, you'll join the crowd, a group of members just like you who want to help pay for each other's unexpected medical events. This open enrollment, take your power back. Join Crowd Health to get started today for $99 for your first 3 months using code LOCKDOWN at joincrowdhealth.com. That's joincrowdhealth.com, code LOCKDOWN. Crowd Health is not insurance. Opt out, take your power back. This is how we win. Join crowdhealth.com starting September 15th. There are a few other vital points that need to be made that I haven't seen anyone else make, so I'm going to do it. First off, this attack, this murder, happened on August 22nd. It is September 9th today. And this story did not see the light of day until about 4 days ago, and that was only on social media. And it was brought to the president's attention because it went so viral on social media that it then forced the media to cover it. Point being, August 22nd was nearly 3 weeks ago. So it's my opinion, based off of how obviously evil and crazy this story is, this video was suppressed. That this story was not supposed to get out. And I'll tell you what I think. I don't know for sure, but it sure looks like it. Is that because it was so egregious and because of what he says in the aftermath, got that white girl, they tried to suppress this story. They tried to not cover it. Sure, they would have prosecuted him, and I'm sure he would have gone away for decades. But regardless, they did not want the public to know about this story. I don't see any other explanation for how this video gets suppressed for over 3 weeks or nearly 3 weeks. Also, no media coverage. Also, the local politicians were talking about how they didn't want this to be covered. They didn't want people to be talking about it because they knew that it would inflame racial tensions, was their justification. As if the George Floyd video wasn't shown on a fucking loop for months in the summer of 2020. As if our cities didn't burn down as a consequence of that video being put on loop for fucking months. But you can't show this one, though. Why? Double standard much? Yeah. Really disturbing. Really infuriating. Second, people continue to refer to this now as basically any news coverage that's coming from the liberal rags, New York Times, they're framing it as this is creating an outcry amongst the right. Why is this partisan? Was she some hardcore Trump supporter? No, actually, Iryna had a poster that said Black Lives Matter on her bedroom door that was hung up. I sincerely doubt she was a Trump supporter or MAGA or right wing at all. Maybe she should have been. She was not. So why is this partisan? Because she's just white. That's it. That makes her the other in their worldview. How crazy is that? How absolutely sick is that? A girl who probably would have voted for them just despises her so much because of her skin that she has to be a Trump supporter because she's white. Or this story only matters to people on the right because she's white. It's absurd. It's obscene. Also, they're trying to frame this as this is, MAGA's George Floyd moment. That we're going to turn this into some sort of George Floyd thing. No, excuse me. First off, not comparable, okay? Not comparable. This is a cold-blooded murder of a total stranger against a total stranger. This is not a cop that was dealing with a guy who passed off counterfeit bills, had a lethal dose of fentanyl in his system, kneeled on his back, maybe contributed to his death. I don't know. It's none of that. There is no conflating fact variables or confusion here. This is not a police brutality debate or use of violence or use of force debate. This is a straight up, no excuses murder of a white girl. Also, none of the cops involved in the George Floyd killing were like got that black boy. They weren't talking about his race at all. There's no evidence. If there was any evidence, trust me, you would have heard about it back then. Never happened. Because I don't think they were racially motivated at all, actually. Whereas this is. So if you're going to say that this is the right wing's George Floyd moment, well, actually, this is a real moment because it actually was racially motivated, whereas yours wasn't. And there is no confusion as to whether or not this was a murder. I hope we can agree on that. I just wanted to get that off my chest because to describe this as partisan is sick beyond words. Also, you guys are the party that argues in favor of, women's rights, right? You don't want to be in a Handmaid's Tale and all this bullshit you guys say constantly. Okay, well, what about her right to live? Why am I upset and you're not? Have you asked yourself that? Have you thought about it at all? Are you questioning your humanity? Because you should be. If the first thing you see when you see a black guy brutally murder a tiny little innocent white girl is, oh my God, this is really going to help Trump, you're fucking nuts, man. You're out. You've totally lost your mind. You have gotten so deep in the partisan Kool-Aid, you've lost your humanity. You need to check yourself into a facility, honestly. Like there's something deeply fucked up. That's all I got to say. That's it. That's my venting. Oh, man. This is weird. Weird times we're living in. We're surrounded by homeless crazy people and Democrat crazy people and some right-wing crazy people and just a whole lot of crazy people. And we don't have asylums. Strap in. Oh, man. All right. I didn't expect this one to go so long. So I'm going to cut here and do another episode on these other topics, these, potpourri of topics that I wanted to get into. I hope that this one was interesting. I hope that I managed to make it informative and not just pure rage baiting, because there's a lot of that going around. If you enjoyed it, please do share it around. Let people know about the show. Liberty Lockdown, they can subscribe on Apple, Spotify, wherever else. And if you're watching right now, make sure you subscribe to and set up auto downloads. You get all the latest episodes. It also helps with my numbers and vice versa. If you're listening right now, if you can go to YouTube or Rumble and subscribe to Liberty Lockdown, I would greatly appreciate it. This is going to, again, be a controversial one and a contentious one, perhaps. I don't think it should be, but it probably will. Leave a comment down below. Let me know what I got wrong. Let's duke it out in the comments. If you guys enjoyed this episode, please do hit the like button and subscribe. I will see you tomorrow. Peace.